there's such a need for psychiatrists in this country because there's, an exploding mental health. I don't even want to call it an epidemic, but there's the need now more than ever before. The average psychiatrist who hangs up their own shingle and opens up their office, right? So you got to pay overhead or for, you got to pay your lease and you got to pay, for staff and pay for your medical record system and pay all these things. With the falling reimbursement rates from the insurance companies, even from the state insurance, Medicaid or whatever, with the falling reimbursement, some doctors have to make that harsh decision. I can't afford to take people with this or this insurance because your insurance company is not going to pay me for seeing you. And it's not that I don't want to see you to help you, but if I see you, how am I going to pay to keep my doors open? There is such a need, especially for primary care physicians. But what was starting to happen is that there are a lot of doctors going through burnout. A lot of doctors going through burnout. And really, honestly, in the last, especially since after the pandemic, people have been leaving medicine in droves. And it's scary.
Welcome to today's Heart of the Hustle. I am here with Dr. Oni. So excited to be here. She is an incredible direct primary care concierge style doctor here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and has such an interesting story. So excited to have you here today.
My pleasure.
So glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, well, where do I start?
You've got a long, interesting story. So I guess start at the very beginning.
Okay, so I Dr. Oni just recently moved here to the DFW from the state of Illinois, but I'm actually Nigerian-Canadian, moved to the United States just as part of my medical school training, and then I just stayed. So I'm someone who, always wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid, but, sometimes life kind of happens and sometimes those dreams just sort of get pushed to the back burner. At the time, I was living in Nigeria and it just seemed like, forget this. It's time to hit the workforce, start making a living, start a family. And I just kind of forgot all about that. But over time, as, the years went by, that pull, that dream just never went away. And I'm glad that I was finally able to pursue my dream.
Because you went to medical school, kind of not a non-traditional path. In other words, you didn't go like undergrad and then right to medical school, right? You built a life in between.
Indeed, I did. So I actually, back home in Nigeria was working as a process engineer. But then when we immigrated to Canada, I was already, a mom of 3, had, pretty much established my life. So it was like picking up to go start all over again. And at the time, I just expected that I would get, the same kind of job that I was doing in Nigeria because there was a sister company in Calgary, which was where we moved to. However, when I went, to say, hey, here I am, when can I start work? They're like, well, where's your engineering degree? And I don't have a formal degree in engineering. My undergrad was actually in biochemistry. So, back in Nigeria, it was kind of one of those, learn on the job sort of thing. So I expected, but I've been doing this job. I have all the experience, but they're like, well, we need an engineering degree. And so at the time I knew, okay, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, but do I really want to go do engineering? I don't think I'm an engineer at heart. But at the same time, I thought, it's too late. I'm too old to start thinking about going back to medical school. I'll just do something that's healthcare related. And if I can work at the hospital, maybe it'll satisfy that itch for me. And so at the time, I had gone to study to be a nuclear medicine technologist. However, when I finished my diploma, there was a worldwide shortage of nuclear isotopes. So there were no jobs.
Great.
I was
Thanks for the degree.
Yeah, is this my luck or what is going on here? And it's interesting because the other day I was doing a little thing on my Instagram and I talked about wearing your scrubs out in the community because I feel like that chance encounter with a young lady who was wearing scrubs at the local supermarket. I was at that point where I was just in limbo, kind of confused. Like, what am I going to do now? I just put all this money into doing this diploma and now there are no jobs. Like no one would hire. It was a worldwide downtime. And so I walked into my local grocery store that day and I saw this lady wearing, green scrubs. So I kind of just walked up to her. I said, hi. And I blurted out, are you a doctor? And she says, oh, no. And I said, so what are you? And she says, I'm an MRI technologist. I was like, MRI? What's that? And so she kind of told me a little bit about it. And that's how I sort of went back and studied MRI technology. So I actually worked as an MRI technologist for a while, and I really, really loved my job. I loved it. Stable job, working in the Alberta health system, met lots of patients. But, when you get to scan the patients, you see all this pathology, you know that their lives are going to be forever changed by what you've just seen. But then as a technologist, you have no real role after that. You don't know, you may never see them again unless they come back for a follow-up scan. And I just always had that pull wondering, well, what's going to happen to that lady now? Who's going to take care of her? Is she going to get better with this cancer or with this MS? And so that desire was still there. And, just having a conversation with my friend one day and with my husband, who kept saying, I think you should go do it because I think you're going to get bored one day. And I remember saying, it's too late, I'm too old. And my friend said, whether you go or not, you're going to be old anyway. So would you rather go and be old knowing that you gave it your best shot, even if it didn't work out, but you would be satisfied knowing I tried, right?
Yeah.
Or be old and always wonder, what if I had done it?
What great advice.
And so I'm glad I bit the bullet and did it.
So you went back. How old were you at this point?
I think I was about 37 or 38.
Wow. And how old were the kids?
So my oldest at the time, I think he was about 12. My daughter was about 9 and my son was 8.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible. So you decide to go back to medical school with 3 little kids.
And that was quite the experience.
Yeah. So what did that, just from a family perspective, what did that look like? How did you guys manage that? Because I assume your husband was working full time.
Yes. So my husband was working full time, actually in a completely different country. And when we talked about it, it kind of just made more sense for me to have the kids than for him to have them. So I took them with me.
Because you went from Canada to
Dominica.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you brought the kids.
I brought the kids with me.
And he stayed in Canada.
No, he actually went back to Nigeria to work in Nigeria. So it was quite a challenge. But I always say, on this journey, my kids were as vested as I was in the journey. And the day I actually got my diploma and walked across the stage, I'm like, they own this just as much as I do because, I had to make sure that they were fed, clothed, their homework was done. I was literally mom, dad, their, emotional support, spiritual support. And so they were very, very understanding. They understood when, okay, mom's cranky today. Let's just kind of stay out of the way, because pretty much the good thing was there were other kids who were there as well. There were other parents who had kids. So they kind of formed their own little community. But it was a challenge. And I must say, at the end, I'm just glad that it worked out.
That's incredible. So how many years of medical school?
So 4 years of medical school. Yep. So you spend 2 years in the classroom just doing the real didactic work. And then in the latter 2 years, you go off to the hospitals to start the actual clinical rotations, like seeing patients, still studying and doing exams, but still, you're now treating real people.
What would you say to other moms who are in that same situation? I think we've all had that moment where we're like, I'm too old. I'm just too old to do this. I've got 3 little kids. What would you say to them?
I would say, you know what? Just do it. I don't think it's ever too late to reinvent yourself. And I look at myself and I feel like my story is still evolving because there's all these little wheels spinning in my head. I'm not even sure where my journey is going to take me. But, I've recognized that it's never too old. You're never too old to reinvent yourself. It's never too late. If there's something, because a lot of us sometimes, I feel like a lot of women sometimes put their dreams on hold because I got to take care of the kids and do this and this. But then when the kids are older and they leave home, now the nest is empty. Now what? So I would say if you have a compelling dream, as long as it's a compelling dream, go ahead and pursue it.
And everything else you'll just make it work.
You will make it work. Because now you got life experience. So see, I was worried about, oh my gosh, how am I going to compete with the younger people? But I found that at the end of the day, at least when I talked to the people who did my med school interview, they're like, we think that made you a better candidate because you had life experience. You had, all these other things that you brought to the table. You had, work experience. You dealt with people, dealt with patients. So honestly, for me, I really love the patient encounter part because I'd got so used to dealing with patients when, doing the MRIs and knowing how to talk to them. And so that actually gave me an edge. It was very seamless transition into the hospital.
But now you got to follow people through their whole journey.
Yes. And that for me was the most rewarding part. So you get to be there to hold someone's hand when they get bad news. You also get to be there to hold their hand and share their joys, and the highs. And, anything from, oh, I graduated high school, or, oh, now I'm getting engaged, or now I got married, or, oh, I have got a granddaughter. You just get to be a part, because that's what part of what being a family physician is about. You technically see patients from the cradle to the grave. And so you have time to really forge those long-term therapeutic connections with them.
And I love that idea. Just think about, our doctors and how they've been involved, and my son will walk in and be like, oh my God, you grew a foot. How did you grow a foot in the last year? Right. And because they know.
They know. Yeah. Literally sometimes you literally take care of that child as a newborn. And then you see them. I'm not at that stage yet where I've, had people that were newborns that I took care of that are already getting married. But I've seen that, with my colleagues. It's like, oh my God, now you're getting married and now you're going to have a baby and I get to deliver your baby because I held you as a newborn. It's very, very rewarding.
That's cool. So, okay, you finished medical school.
Yes, ma'am.
And then what happens?
Oh, and then I, took a job working in Peoria, Illinois. Really loved it because, again, I was working outpatient in a family medicine clinic, and that was now my chance to kind of put my stamp on my own practice and how I want to practice. And, just got to meet so many people over the course of, how many years was I working there? Probably about 6 or 7 years. Really loved it. Had a really great team spirit. My staff were just wonderful, But then after a while, that just the way the healthcare system is set up wasn't allowing me to, practice to my heart's content. And so that's why I left to start my own direct primary care practice.
Yeah, what do you think are the challenges with the modern medical system?
There's a myriad of...
Where do we start?
It's like, where do we start? So I think one of the biggest parts, or at least one of the biggest problems that, and you hear this across the board when you talk to physicians across the country, is the fact that we've somehow kind of given up our autonomy. Because when you start working for these large hospital groups with the insurance companies in the middle, pretty much the insurance companies determine how you practice, right? So first of all, because they're in charge of determining reimbursements, so then that means, oh, how much do we get for seeing this patient? Well, we're only going to pay you X amount. Well, which then means to get, whatever reasonable amount of money, now you got to see XXX more number of patients. And so you have patients crammed on a typical workday, which then means you don't really get to spend enough time as much as you would like to with a patient. And so patients too are feeling discontent and dissatisfied because they feel like they're just getting shuttled through the healthcare system. My doctor doesn't even really know me or doesn't take the time to talk to me. I have to wait 3-4 months to get an appointment to get seen. And then when I get in there, they're telling me, because now I have a long laundry list of problems that I got to bring to my doctor. But if this is my yearly physical, they're telling me, oh, sorry, insurance will only allow us code this as a yearly physical. If we talk about any other problem, you're going to get a super bill on top of that.
Or you have to come back. That's happened to me. Exactly. I'm like, can I just put two appointments right next to each other? And I'll go back out in the lobby and come back in. Will that work?
I wish it were as simple as that. And, and sometimes patients will insist, oh, no, I don't want to come back. Let's just talk about, whatever the problems are today. And so as a doctor, now you got to bill that yearly physical visit plus the extra problems on top. And I somehow think patients don't understand because then when they get that bill, they get mad. Why do I have a bill when my yearly physical should have been covered by my insurance? Well, your insurance said because we talked about this, and this other problems, which I just don't think is fair. When you come in for that visit with your physician, you should be able to talk about the things that are bothering you and, concerning you. And the doctor should be able to spend enough time to listen to you.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience. I just had my physical a week or so, 2 weeks ago. And, I had the normal laundry list because I haven't gone to the doctor like everyone else. I have a busy life and so I'm like, okay, I have this, this thing on my finger and I have this, whatever. My whole, is this mole cancerous, right? I had the whole list. And by the time we got through the list, I could tell she was like, we're out of time, right? Because you only have a certain amount of time. And so she listened to my heart real quick and was like, okay, you're good. Let's get some blood work. And I was like, you're not going to do anything else to check on me. But I could tell that she was like, this is how much time we got. We can, let's work through your list because those are the things that are important to you. But I didn't get any other kind of exam. And so I was a little like, ooh, I don't know.
That's also a bummer. That's one of the things that I actually have a problem with, because according to the way the new, with insurance stipulations, it turns out, I think this started maybe about a year or so ago, for a yearly physical, you don't actually require a physical exam. And to me, that's just crazy, right? So basically the yearly physical has been reduced to a bunch of check boxes where you have to check off, okay, have you done your mammogram? Have you done your colonoscopy? Have you done all these other things? Well, what about the physical exam? And that's something I worry is getting lost, the art of the actual physical exam, where you got to touch the patient. To me, touch is healing, right? So even just be able to touch my patient and do a good exam from head to toe, then I know, yes, I did my part. We looked at your skin. We looked at, your ears, your eyes. We listened to your heart and lungs, and we listened to your belly. Because sometimes, too, you make these little findings that can completely change a patient's life. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I saw a man, I think it was a couple of years ago when I was still at my old practice, and he hadn't gone to the doctor in a long time. But he had this, huge umbilical hernia that, it had started to bother him. So he thought, okay, now I think it's time to go get this looked at. So he essentially just walked into my office and, made the appointment. It really wasn't to establish care. It was more to get a referral to a general surgeon. And so I said, okay, well, when was the last time you went to the doctor? All right, since you're here, let's just do a quick head to toe. And so when I started doing his exam, I kind of felt along his neck, and I felt this hard mass. Now, normally when I always tell my patients, when you go to the doctor and we're, touching around your neck, we're not just trying to feel you up. We're looking for lymph nodes, right? And so I felt, it was and I said, just, how long has this been here? He says, well, it's been a while. I said, does it bother? He says, no, it's not painful. So you never talked to anybody about it? He said, no. I already had this sense of foreboding because I knew that lymph node felt hard, solid, and fixed. And that's never a good sign. It turned out that he had thyroid cancer. And I was glad that, because if he hadn't come to see me, or if I hadn't done that exam that day, he could have kept walking around with this until now. And next thing you know, it's stage 4, and which completely changes the game in terms of treatment and prognosis. So, I'm a big one for the physical exam.
And he could have gone and just gotten the hernia fixed too, and they probably wouldn't have ever checked it and wouldn't have ever seen it.
Oh yeah, because the general surgeon, that's not their business. You're coming for the hernia. We're going to fix your hernia, send you on your way.
Yeah, I find that interesting too, as I think we've lost, and you comment on this because you know better than me. I think we've lost the art of general medicine. And I mean, I'm getting older. And so I have my knees hurt and my ankle hurts, my hip hurts. And, I had my shoulder done and all this stuff. And so in this same appointment, I was like, hey, I want to get my knee looked at. And then I have this ankle thing. And she's like, well, there's a knee guy. And then there's an ankle guy. There's a knee person. There's an ankle person. There's a hip person. And then the shoulder person is different from, and but who's looking at the whole system? Because could it be that my ankle
is caused by problems? Yeah.
Yeah, my ankle never healed properly, which causes me a slight limp, which is what's screwing up my knee and my hip. Who's looking at the whole system, right? If I just go in and say my knee hurts, they're going to fix my knee, but they're not going to fix the holistic problem.
So I kind of have, two answers to that. So honestly, really, your primary care physician is who's looking at the whole system, right? Unfortunately, it seems almost like, the big healthcare systems, it got to a point where they were almost reducing primary care doctors to just a referral funnel. Right. And that's not what we're meant for. Realistically, yes, we do have specialists because of course, I always say, like in medicine, as with anything, there's something for everybody. And that's why when we went, when you literally go into your med school class, as at first we all come in, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, nobody really knows what they want to be. But then as, we start to settle into ourselves, you can already tell that one's going to be a surgeon. Oh, this one's going to be a pediatrician. There's a niche for everybody. But as an internist or a generalist, we're the ones who are supposed to be examining your whole body and kind of putting it together. Before I send you to a specialist, it's because I have a question that I can't answer, or I've at least worked up the problem to a reasonable extent, which then gives the specialist a good place to jump off from. right? So I can tell them, here's what we've done, here's what we've done, here's where I got stuck. Now over to you to figure it out, right? In terms of the, like the orthopedics though, we have to understand orthopedic surgeons really do go and do an extra fellowship, because some people decide, I want to specialize just in shoulders, or I want to just do, hips, I want to do knees, I want to do ankles. So they have some do spine. So they have their own area of specialization. But realistically, when you go even to the orthopedist, when they do a good exam, they'll be able to tell you, this knee, your knee doesn't really have a problem. Maybe it's because of the mechanics of how you've been favoring one side of your hip that's causing this. So if we take care of your hip, maybe the problems with the knee will be okay.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit more about direct primary care. So I know that one of the things that you decided to do when you moved here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area is kind of leave the traditional system and start doing, hang up your own shingle and do direct primary care. Tell us what that is. Tell us how it's different. Tell us how it solves some of the problems we talked about earlier in the interview around kind of the common medical system and insurance-based medical system.
Direct primary care, just, for a definition for anyone who's listening in who's never heard of this before, basically direct primary care is a membership style practice where pretty much, patients pay I will call it a low or affordable monthly fee. And with that monthly fee, you get unlimited visits to your physician. You can call or text them if you have a question or a concern. You get discounted labs and imaging. And so, pretty much you have access to your physician. I mean, within reason, of course, right? Now, how it's different from the traditional healthcare system is that there's no insurance middleman. Okay, so now I'm not worrying about an insurance company because I'm either worrying about reimbursement. They're not going to be able to see. And I'll segue back to, there's such a need for psychiatrists in this country because there's, an exploding mental health, I don't even want to call it an epidemic, but there's the need now more than ever before. Now, but the average psychiatrist who hangs up their own shingle and opens up their office, right? So you got to pay overhead, or for, you got to pay your lease, and you got to pay, for staff, and pay for your medical record system, and pay all these things. With the falling reimbursement rates from the insurance companies, even from the state insurance, Medicaid or whatever, with the falling reimbursement, some doctors have to make that harsh decision. I can't afford to take people with this or this insurance because your insurance company is not going to pay me for seeing you. And it's not that I don't want to see you to help you, but if I see you, how am I going to pay to keep my doors open? I still have to pay the bills, pay the rent, pay the utilities, and take care of my own family. And so for a long time, it just felt like doctors are being almost sacrificed, on the altar of just more productivity. You got to get the numbers in and out. And there is such a need, especially for primary care physicians. But what was starting to happen is that there are a lot of doctors going through burnout. And really, honestly, in the last, especially since after the pandemic, people have been leaving medicine in droves. And it's scary. Because, then what happens to the aging population? There's a physician group that I belong to on Facebook, and you would see actually where parents are asking, even dual physician households are saying, well, my son wants to go to medical school. And people are like, no, tell him, don't do it, do not do it, exit left. And that's crazy. So even look at the pandemic, for example. I mean, doctors worked so hard in the hospitals, day in, day out, even putting their own families at risk while they were going. And they were hailed as heroes during the time. And all of a sudden, as soon as the pandemic was over, now the doctor is the villain. Go on social media these days. Doctors are just getting a bad rap. And I keep trying to say it. I'm like, I'm going to make a plug here for physicians, especially primary care physicians. But in general, honestly, most physicians just really want to take care of their patient. We don't want to have to worry about the billing and worry about the insurance company and who has what. I just want to see you and make you feel better. But all these factors are outside of our control. So I'll give you a case in point. So I've never been one to talk and type. I'm not a touch typist. I just never learned it. Even though, I learned how to type with the old typewriter when I was in, high school, but
I can't do it either. I have like my own system that I made, right? Like in my brain, and people will watch me type and they're like, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Somehow I just made up my own system, but even then I can't do it. I still have to.
Yeah, but I think my kids laugh at me all the time because I'm looking at them, they're typing away and they're looking at me. I'm like, how are you doing this? So because of that, I always would just really engage with my patient. So, and I'm not saying this, out of any sense of self-aggrandizement, because I had patients, even when I lived in Peoria, who would drive from 4 hours outside of town to come see me. I'm like, okay, you've moved. Can you find a new doctor closer to where you are? They're like, oh, no, I'm going to come see you. Oh, because my old doctor never talked to me or never looked at me. And I would be like, hey, let's pull the plug on that, right? And I had to sometimes explain several times. That's, sometimes it's not that your doctor doesn't want to talk to you or look at you, but when he has 25, 30 patients to see in a day, he only has she only has a certain number of minutes to spend with you. So we're going to come in and be like, oh, how are you? And some people are able to do it, talk and type at the same time and engage with you. I was never able to do that. So I would put the computer away and really talk to you. So my patients loved me for that. But what they didn't see was that after everyone's gone, and the lights are off, I still have to go back and do the charting. I still have to go back and, make sure I'm meeting all the insurance stipulations. And that was draining my soul. It was taking away time from my family, spending weekends, which is all unpaid labor, trying to, put all the documentation in place. And so finally I had to be like, sometimes the doctor just decides, you know what, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to go home. So you have to, at some point, how do I separate myself from, I want to get all my charts done, 5:30, I'm picking my bag and I'm going home. But sometimes you sacrifice the opportunity to really build that therapeutic connection with the patient because all the patient is seeing is he or she didn't even look at me. And funny, the day I knew I had to leave, the day, I don't remember the date, but I remember the day. So I walked in my exam room and one of my long-term patients was sitting in the chair. And, even everyone, we're all human beings. You have your intuition. You can read the room. And as soon as I walked in, I took one look at her face and I knew something was wrong. But right there and then, the thought just crossed through my mind. Do I ask her what's wrong? Because if I ask, I know that's going to open Pandora's box and 20 minutes isn't going to take care of that. And I already have patients waiting down the hall for me. Now the whole day is shot. But, as soon as the thought flashed through my mind, instantly I was horrified because I was like, what kind of person am I becoming that thought should even ever cross my mind? So was I just going to walk in there and start talking about other inanities, like talking about how's your blood pressure and how's your cholesterol? Okay, bye. When I could tell something was really wrong. So, of course, I had to just, forget about the time. How are you? What's going on? And of course, I got an earful. But that day I knew I can't keep doing this. Something has to give.
So you opened this direct primary care. Tell me about the types of patients that come to you. Do they not have insurance or do they have insurance but still want to see you kind of as a supplement to their insurance? What's kind of the standard patient?
So that's a great question, actually, because a lot of people think, well, but I have insurance. Why do I have to come to your doctor? So first off, direct primary care aims to solve that access problem. I would say that's the first thing is the access problem. Because sometimes you have insurance, you have great insurance, but you can't get in to see your doctor or, for 4 or 5 months. Because the average doctor, I would say, carries probably about 2,500 to 3,500 patients on their panel. And even if you were to shuffle that number, divided by, say you're seeing 20 patients every day, 5 days a week throughout the year, I don't think you'll get through the 3,500, right? So which means you kind of have to wait a couple months again to get your, of course, some doctors are great when you have a problem. They might say, okay, squeeze them in, or you got to go to the urgent care, But the access problem, so some people have insurance, great insurance, but I always say, when you have insurance for your car, you don't use that to go get your oil change, right? Or your tires tweaked. You save that for when you have a bad car crash, right? So I think maybe that's a better way how insurance should be used. So some people have insurance but don't have access to their physician. Or you have a really high deductible, which is where you have to pay X amount out of pocket before the insurance company is even going to kick in and, look at you. Case in point, my daughter had to have an MRI a couple of years ago. And even with our insurance, covering a portion of it, I still had to pay about $1,500 for that MRI because we were billed about $5,000 for that MRI, right? And so that's one subset of people who actually have insurance but don't have access. Now, there's some other people who don't have insurance at all. And now it's like, so, and the truth of the matter is, because trying to get insurance yourself, if you're not working a corporate job, when you work a corporate job, it's a little different because, yes, the dollars come out of your paycheck, but you never really saw that money. So you kind of don't feel it as badly. But either when you're a small business owner or you're not working, with a big corporate job where your employer is providing the benefits, now you don't have healthcare. Trying to buy it yourself through the marketplace, it sometimes can run up to $600 a month for one person. That's a lot of money if you have a family of 5. And so when people have to sacrifice between, do I pay these bills or do I go to the doctor? Nah, I'm healthy anyway. I don't need the doctor. So they always put that aside. But I always say, your body whispers until it starts to scream. You want to catch the whispers before they become a loud scream. And so preventive care is really, really the bedrock. I always say, it's like taking your car to the shop. That's what going to the doctor really is like. So you take your car to the shop, you change the oil, change the filters, rotate the tires, and you're good for a certain number of miles or a certain period of time. You only run into trouble when you don't take it in. Now it breaks down in 75. Now you need an engine. Now you need a tow truck. Now you need all these other things, and it becomes this dumpster fire that you probably would have prevented if you had just gone for that oil change, right? And so it's just getting people to understand that people shouldn't have to worry about not being able to see the doctor because of cost. So what direct primary care does by eliminating the middleman is that you pay a low monthly fee and you get to see your doctor, the same doctor every time, which is also great. Forging those relationships, you at least are getting checked out, and we can pick up on problems before they become something bigger.
Yeah, and if a problem comes up and you need something major, right? You need that MRI, you need the whatever, or, God forbid, cancer treatments, then you can start working through your insurance if you need it, right? One of the things that I've seen people do is they'll have a direct primary care, right, through you or, other primary care doctor, and then they'll have catastrophic insurance through the marketplace. Yes. So in the end, it ends up being way less than that, whatever, $600 a month you were saying. But you're getting access to a doctor on a regular basis, especially so many people have pre-existing chronic conditions now, right? Yeah. Diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those things. They can't get into the regular doctor for those. So then they keep some sort of insurance because they've, for catastrophic types of things that, God forbid, you need some major
hospitalization or
right.
surgery. And that's what we encourage. One other beauty of direct primary care that I must not fail to mention is the fact that because it's a cash-based system, we're able to negotiate discounted labs and imaging rates with either standalone imaging centers or even, the regular, places where we get our blood drawn. And so with that, we're able to cut out that cost in the middle and just, get you to pay what you actually should pay.
And it's substantial. Yeah. I don't think we realize how much the lab work and x-rays and
how much they actually cost
and how much they actually cost. Because and somebody gave me a tip a couple years ago when my shoulder was first starting to have challenges, is just call the MRI place and say, hey, how much is it if I pay insurance? And then you can see how much your deductible is. How much is it if I pay cash? And the difference is like $5,000 versus like $900.
Oh,
it's incredible, the difference.
I'll do you one better because my son's about to have an MRI on Friday. At the imaging center where we're going to pay cash, his MRI with contrast is going to cost $300. But my daughter's MRI for her back, we were billed $5,000 and still had to pay $1,500 out of pocket for that MRI. So that's a huge chunk of change.
So always better to try to just go cash. And that's one of the things that you can help people with.
Yes.
And especially because you probably have negotiated rates with a lot of these places, right? Or they just know you, right? If you're a doctor and you call and you're like, hey, what's the best you can do? You're going to get a better deal.
Well, yes, that's one thing, but also the beauty of DPC is that with DPC, there's such I don't know if to call it a band of doctors. I feel like it's become a movement. And so we have these groups. There's actually one, I belong to what's called the DPC Alliance, and we've been able to sort of form a network. So it's like, okay, now we're able to go to the imaging centers and say, hey, there's a whole group of us. If you give us a good rate in whatever state, we can get these numbers down. So it's not just me walking in as somebody who they don't know to say, hey, give me a good rate. We've been able to negotiate these group rates, which then benefit everybody.
So you mentioned the kids. Tell us more about them. They saw you through medical school, and now have they flown the nest?
Yes and no. There's a little contingent. So my oldest son is 25. He lives and works in Canada. And my younger three, so my daughter's 22. My son just turned 21 2 days ago. And I have a little 9-year-old.
Wait, so you went to medical school with 3, but you just mentioned 4.
And then there were 4. Don't ask me how that happened. So I call her my little oops baby. She says, why are you always calling me an oops baby? And the older ones get a kick out of telling her because you weren't part of the plan. That's another story. And I'm like, wait, I'm the doctor. I should know better.
If you need me to explain how that happened, maybe you need to go back to medical school.
I'm like, I'm the doctor. I should know better. But, that was a little mishap with an IUD. And then next thing we knew, here's this little baby. And what's ironic is that I was interviewing for residency at the time that I got pregnant with her. So when, I'm like, wait, what's going on? I thought it was just the stress of residency, traveling all over the country for interviews. And I'm like, but wait, my period's never late. And I'm like, pregnant? So I actually started residency pregnant.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell us more about where the kids are now. So when they're older.
Yes, my 22-year-old, she's graduated college. She's working. She's actually job hunting, wanting to move back to Chicago area. My younger son is at the community college here in McKinney, and my little girl's in elementary school.
Oh, that's awesome.
Everyone says, oh, she's going to keep you young. I'm like, actually, she makes me feel my age. Because these days, these bones be creaking. I want to go home after work and just crash on the couch. But she's just like ready to start talking. Yap. Here's my day. I want to go do this and go do that. I'm like, okay. But we're figuring it out.
I love it. And I love that you're such a good example of really allowing yourself to become who you were meant to be and not having kids, right? Allowing them to come with you, and that kids aren't a reason to stop. And I think so many women do that, and even men, right? This is what I'm supposed to do in life, and they never really get to explore who they are. I think that's why we have the proverbial midlife crisis, because so many people get to the age where their kids, leave the nest and they're like, what do I want to do? Because they've put that aside. And I think you're such a great example of that. It doesn't need to be a choice between one or the other, that you can do both. Of course, there are some days you can't do both, but you can always do both. And I really admire you for that. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for saying that. That's interesting. I think a lot of times too, people just, do what's necessary. Because sometimes, everyone will say, well, yeah, this is my passion, but passion doesn't pay the bills. And so sometimes because of either thinking about sustenance, you're like, okay, I'm just going to go this route. But then after a while, if it's really meant to be, that discontent will start pulling at you.
And I disagree. I think you can always make money at your passions. You just have to find out how.
You're right. That's true. But, a lot of times when we're younger, it's kind of similar to what happened to me. I was young, graduated. I'm like, well, forget medicine. We got to hit the job market, especially because of where I lived at the time. It's like, okay, this isn't the time to be picky, but I think if it's meant to be, it will be.
Yeah, I did something similar. I left undergrad and I wanted to be a college professor, and I got really sick. And I just wasn't able to. And talking about insurance, I didn't know about direct primary care at the time, and I needed a job with insurance. I was 23. I got kicked off my parents' insurance, right? I needed a job with insurance while I figured out what was going on with me medically. And so I walked away, from all of that for a long time, right? And now, that's on my bucket list for next year. So any local universities or online universities who want to hire me, give me a call.
But in a way, you're doing it. You're teaching.
Yeah.
You're teaching people how to find their voice. You're teaching people how to set up their podcast, so you're still doing it, maybe just not in the fashion that you envisage.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher as a little girl. And now you're right. Now I do it. It doesn't look the way I thought it was going to, but it absolutely is. So
one point I didn't want us to miss is the difference between concierge and DPC? Because
Yes,
I also,
please.
yes, I
Thank
also
you
tend to
for-
hear that a lot.
Yeah, because I said that earlier. So thank you for clarifying.
Because, people tend to mistake DPC for concierge. And concierge, I think, is a concept that's been around for longer. So more people are used to hearing that. But somehow they always assumed, oh, that's for the rich. And so even now when you talk about direct primary care, they assume, well, you guys are only taking care of people who have money. What about those who don't? And so that's why I always feel like I like to clear up the misconception, because those are actually two different modalities. Now, both of them thrive on really getting you good access to both solve the access problem, where you have access to your physician, to the same physician every time, who knows you, knows your history. So they're both solving the access problem, but they're coming at it from different angles. So with direct primary care, we don't deal with insurance at all. The fees are usually lower. Most of the time, you might find doctors who have like a smaller team. So because you're kind of keeping your overhead low, I mean, there is expansion at some point, but most times when you start, for now, my practice is just me. So you start off, so you're able to actually charge people more affordable prices because your overhead is low. With concierge, though, they still do bill insurance, right? So you have to carry insurance. They bill your insurance company, but then they also charge you a surcharge on top of that, which is cash pay. But then that gives you, of course, direct access to your physician 24/7. You literally are, available for your patient. And so I think that's the big differentiator between both of those two. Concierge still bills your insurance for labs, imaging, and other things like that, certain other things, but you still pay a surcharge on top of that. And so that's why people always think, oh, it's for the rich because can't afford that.
It often is very expensive. I mean,
with direct primary care, we completely cut out the insurance, middleman. For people who do have insurance, though, and still want to see a DPC doc, we can sometimes try, if you prefer, to run the imaging or the labs through your insurance. If you don't have a huge out-of-pocket cost, we can do that too, but I don't deal with your insurance company at all. So I think that's the difference. But both those two methods thrive on solving that access problem. So you shouldn't ever call your DPC or your concierge doctor and be told, sorry, we can't see you. You have to wait 3 months. Both of those don't do that.
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for being here.
I love being here. It's this is very exciting for me because one thing I knew, I wanted to also just interject the place of my faith, because I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian doctor. I put that front and center of, who I am. Of course, I'm inclusive. I see anybody and everybody, but I always wanted a space where I'd be able to, just talk to my patients, pray with and for them. And, it's interesting. Even in the traditional healthcare system, I always did that with my patients. And I never had one patient tell me, no, you can't pray for me. But the name of my practice is Zelos Direct Primary Care. So Zelos is Greek for zeal, and that comes from the book of Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, and the latter portion of it that says, the zeal of the Lord will perform it. That's where I get my name from. Zeal is, of course, a synonym for passion, and I'm very passionate about, providing good health care to my patient, looking at you as a whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And it's not just, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on your knee and there you go. So I just wanted more freedom to be able to do what I feel passionately called to do. And so I moved here to the DFW area and just trying to, get the visibility out, put the word out to say, hey, there's a friendly doc in your area, and come see me.
And you're right. And you're in McKinney.
Yes.
Right. Kind of near the square.
Yes, ma'am. Just directly opposite across the street from Chestnut Square.
I love that area. We were talking before the show. I had a studio in that area and absolutely love it. It's so charming.
Yes, it is. It is a really historic downtown McKinney. Honestly, is so beautiful.
So beautiful.
It's so beautiful. The shops, it kind of reminds me of a place where I used to live in Calgary, Alberta. There was a little very chic kind of area called Marda Loop, and that's where I live. It just when I walked down there, it just reminds me of Marda Loop. The cute little shops, the bistros. It's a very different kind of feel.
If people want to find you, where should they look for you?
All right. So my office is at 307 South McDonald Street. I'm in Suite 100E, McKinney, Texas. And my website is www.zelosdpc.com.
Excellent. So glad you were here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for talking to me. This was so much fun. Can we do this every day? I had a lot of fun, it's interesting to me when I talk about my story, because my story was just that, my story. I don't see anything kind of like special about it. I don't, because, while I was in the trenches, I was just fighting to survive. It was just one day after the other, one foot in front of the other. But when I look back, and when I see the awe in people's faces when I tell my story, I'm like, ooh, that must have been something big.
You're like, I guess I am kind of a big deal. I guess I am kind of special.
I think, but that's why I really appreciate conversations like this, because it reminds me where I'm coming from. It reminds me where I am now. And it just helps me see that I'm sitting in answered prayers, even though it may not look exactly like what I want it to be right now. I think sometimes I always say comparison is a thief of joy, and nothing is small until it's compared. So you may compare yourself with other people and think, oh my God, they have it all figured out and but don't forget to look back at where you're coming from. Like, you may not be where you want to be, but you're not where you were. And right there lies huge space for gratitude. And so it was a pleasure to be here today.